In the rolling, misty hills of Kentucky, where silence falls like fog over forgotten meadows, the skeletal remains of Pleasant Hill still stand, a ghost of a community that once pulsed with life and devotion. It was 1834 when Pleasant Hill disappeared. Not burned, not abandoned. Simply vanished. Over 300 souls gone without a trace. No signs of violence, no farewell notes, just empty rooms, dinner plates, still set beds, still made, and a silence so profound, locals to this day refuse to set foot there after dark. For nearly 200 years, the state of Kentucky sealed away the truth, locking records in dusty archives that no one dared to open. Until now. Recently uncovered testimonies written by a visiting inspector from Ohio have shaken the foundations of what we thought we knew about America's religious history. What happened at Pleasant Hill was no simple tragedy. It was a 27-year reign of fear and control cloaked in the robes of holy devotion. And the ones pulling the strings, a single family, powerful, devout, and absolutely ruthless. But before we descend into the shadows of this story, a fair warning: this channel isn't for everyone. Only for those who seek truth where others dare not look. If you're one of us, one of the few willing to stare into the dark corners of history, then hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, what state are you listening from tonight? Now, let's go back to where it all began. The year 1807. The setting, a revival-swept Kentucky, drunk on the fire of the Second Great Awakening. Pleasant Hill was born in that fire, a beacon of spiritual purity, built on Shaker principles, celibacy, communal property, and total separation from the corrupt outside world. Nestled in the fertile bluegrass near Harrodsburg, it attracted hundreds who gave up their worldly possessions in exchange for the promise of spiritual perfection. At the center of it all stood the Richardson family. Chapter 1. The House of Richardson. The Holy Dynasty. Elder Samuel Richardson was a tall, commanding figure, steel-gray eyes, calm voice, immaculate robes. He claimed he had been ordained by Mother Ann Lee's original disciples, a claim no one dared to question. He walked with quiet authority, spoke with theological precision, and dressed with a modesty so perfect it felt curated. Even the skeptics who visited Pleasant Hill left believing. His wife, Sister Martha Richardson, had publicly renounced their marriage, a required Shaker vow. Privately, though, she still shared his quarters. Martha was soft-spoken, gracious, and devastatingly intelligent. She could read a soul like others read scripture, and she used that gift not for healing, but for control. Their children, each one, strategically placed like chess pieces in the community's machinery. Brother Ezekiel Richardson, the eldest son, ran the agricultural empire. Under his leadership, Pleasant Hill transformed from a subsistence commune into a major supplier for the Ohio River Valley. His booming voice echoed across the fields, part preacher, part foreman, all Richardson. Brother Caleb Richardson, younger and colder, was the silent eye behind every curtain. Unofficial head of internal security, Caleb read private letters, listened at doors, and tracked every whispered doubt. Nothing escaped him, and no one dared speak freely. Sister Rebecca Richardson, the oldest daughter, oversaw the women's quarters and indoctrination. Never married, she poured her fierce maternal instincts into molding new converts. Survivors of her counseling would later call her methods psychological demolition. Sister Patience Richardson Just 24 handled the books and the lies. A forger so skilled she could mimic any handwriting in days. She maintained letters, minutes, and records that kept authorities satisfied and truth buried. The rest of the family, just as instrumental. Brother Jeremiah Richardson, Samuel's brother, ran the furniture workshops. Outwardly, it was a Shaker success story, fine handcrafted goods shipped across Kentucky. In truth, it was forced labor dressed in piety. Brother Isaiah Richardson, a cousin, managed their thriving seed business and used it as cover for other activities during his monthly travels through Tennessee, Ohio, and Indiana. Sister Hannah Collins, Martha's sister, ran the kitchens. Her control over the food supply gave her unmatched influence, feeding loyalty, starving dissent. Her study of herbs and effects on mood made her the community's unofficial alchemist. Mother Sarah Richardson, Samuel's aging mother, was the crown jewel of the Richardson myth. Frail, devout, and revered, she seemed like a living relic of Shaka purity. But beneath her shawl and quiet smile was a mind as sharp as razors, the true architect of the Richardson dynasty. And Brother Nathan Richardson, the baby of the family, managed external relations. A charming church-going gentleman who schmoozed with sheriffs and bribed local clergy. His donations to neighboring congregations bought silence and, when needed, protection. Outsiders saw beauty, perfect gardens, shining floors, gentle smiles. What they didn't see was the prison beneath the surface. No one left Pleasant Hill without permission. No conversation went unheard. Every move, every breath was filtered through Richardson hands. Every night, the family gathered behind locked doors to discuss everything. Who had doubts, who cried during prayer, who had smiled too long at a visitor. Pleasant Hill wasn't just a commune. It was a theocracy, a dynasty, a cage, and it worked for almost 30 years. But what happens when cages rust? When whispers turn to screams? That's what we'll uncover next in the forgotten journals of the Ohio Inspector, whose visit would be the first crack in the Richardson family's perfect glass. Chapter 2. The Man Who Asked Too Many Questions. The isolation of Pleasant Hill, geographical and spiritual, made rebellion not just impossible, but incomprehensible. Resistance was an idea foreign to most minds, ground into dust, long before it could take shape. New converts underwent a slow but surgical transformation. For 6 months, under the patient supervision of Sister Martha and Sister Rebecca, newcomers were stripped of their pasts. Memories of family ambition, love, even personal names were gently but relentlessly eroded. In their place, the Richardsons constructed new identities, obedient, reverent, hollow-eyed believers who viewed disobedience not as sin, but as heresy. By the time a convert graduated, they no longer recognized the person they'd once been. Life at Pleasant Hill was a rhythm of control. The bell rang at 4:30 a.m., struck by Brother Caleb's hand. Breakfast followed, seasoned not with love but with quiet surveillance. Throughout the day, tasks were assigned not just for labor but for design. Every pairing, every placement calculated to prevent private whispers, secret alliances, or independent thought. Evening worship was a masterpiece of manipulation led by Samuel Richardson, supported by his children like actors in a holy play. It felt divine. It was precise. It was psychological engineering, dressed in the language of God. And for a time, It worked perfectly until Brother Thomas Whitman stood up, a seed of doubt. It was a bitter morning in February 1812. Ice clung to the edges of windows, and even the candles shivered. Brother Thomas was not a rebel. He had arrived in 1807, one of the first converts. A wealthy merchant whose entire family had been wiped out by cholera. He had given his pain his money and his soul to Pleasant Hill. He donated a thriving dry goods, empire, acres of land, and more importantly, trust. For 5 years he labored in silence, helping with agriculture, mentoring new members, never once challenging a decision. But Thomas had the eyes of a businessman, trained, calculating, precise. Over time, things began to gnaw at him. The seed sales reported by Brother Isaiah didn't match what Thomas had observed during deliveries. The furniture revenue, managed by Jeremiah, didn't align with production numbers. And the most chilling detail, the community claimed nearly 400 members, yet food and supplies suggested barely 250 were being fed. He prayed. He waited. Then finally, at the monthly meeting, Thomas rose, withered hands, holding neatly written papers, his voice trembling with both reverence and dread. Brothers and sisters, he began softly. Our community has been blessed beyond measure, but I see contradictions, and I fear they dishonor our covenant. Silence. In the crowded meeting hall, every Richardson eye flicked with silent signals. Just seconds, but enough. Samuel remained serene, hands folded, but his eyes sharpened. Sister Martha's smile never faltered, but her knuckles turned white around her prayer book. As Thomas continued calling out discrepancies in Isaiah's seed prophets and Jeremiah's workshop numbers, Brother Caleb rose from his chair near the door, casually, innocently. But he now stood between Thomas and any hope of escape. Sister Rebecca stared at him like a hawk, not in fear but in calculation. Every word, every tremble, every bead of sweat on his brow, filed away for later. Thomas wasn't done. We claim 400 members, yet feed only 250. 50 workers are listed in the furniture shop, but I count 37. These numbers do not match, brothers, and I ask only for honesty as stewards of God's bounty. The voice that answered him was neither angry nor loud. It was ancient. Mother Sarah Richardson, the supposed matriarch of spiritual grace, spoke from the shadows. Brother Thomas, she said gently, your concerns reveal a heart still clinging to worldly calculations. In our blessed community, we trust those divinely appointed. Your faith needs rest and prayer. Samuel nodded like a father, forgiving a troubled son. Your dedication moves me, he murmured. But perhaps your spirit is clouded by the memory of your former life. Sister Hannah, please prepare Brother Thomas a cup of your special chamomile tea. He needs rest. The meeting moved on. On the surface, nothing changed, but the air had grown thin. That night, Brother Thomas Whitman was dead. A peaceful death, or so they claimed. Sister Rebecca was the one who found him. Her voice, full of tears, told a somber tale. He passed in his sleep, after confessing his doubts in prayer. The Lord in his mercy took him gently. The community wept, or pretended to. After all, to question the story was to question God. His funeral the next day became a morality play, a warning against letting worldly thinking cloud spiritual submission. But Sister Mary Caldwell, a young cleaner assigned to the men's quarters, noticed things others ignored or pretended not to. The room smelled of bitter almonds. Despite the windows being open all night, Thomas's fingernails were blue. Not the color of sleep, but of something far more sinister. And there, on the edge of his mouth, she saw white foam. Rebecca wiped it away before anyone else arrived. Later that evening, Mary watched in silent horror as Brother Caleb burned all of Thomas's belongings. Every letter, every ledger, every page of those damning numbers. The fire crackled in the communal hearth as Samuel called it a cleansing ceremony. But Mary Caldwell, barely 19, knew what she had seen, and she would never forget it. Chapter 3. The Erasure of Thomas Whitman and the Birth of the Machine. Brother Thomas Whitman was laid to rest under grey skies and choreographed tears. But his death was only the beginning. Within hours of his peaceful passing, the Richardson family moved like clockwork. Sister Martha led quiet prayer circles inviting members to confess their own doubts, not in search of healing, but to expose. To doubt the leadership, even in silence, was now synonymous with doubting God Himself. Brother Ezekiel intensified the workday. No more idle moments, no more lingering thoughts. From sunrise to sundown, fields and workshops hummed with forced devotion, not to holy labor, but to distraction. If you were exhausted, you couldn't think. If you couldn't think, you couldn't rebel. At night, Brother Jeremiah led calm, collected discussions on the dangers of challenging spiritual authority. Thomas Whitman was now a ghost story told in warm tones, a cautionary tale whispered with forced sadness and sharpened meaning. He loved too much of the world, Jeremiah would say, eyes glowing in candlelight. And the world swallowed him. But the most haunting part was not what they said about Brother Thomas. It was what they didn't. Within days, his name was scrubbed from daily records, his tools redistributed, his sleeping quarters reassigned. Within a month, he existed only as a brief death notice in a dusty logbook. Thomas Whitman never existed, and his deletion marked the first perfect rehearsal of what would become a pattern, a system of suppression that would refine itself over the next 22 years. The retreats disguised prisons. The Richardsons never called it punishment. They never raised a hand in anger. Instead, when a member grew too curious, too attached to the outside world, too nostalgic, too human, they were said to be experiencing a spiritual crisis. What they needed was a retreat. Brother Jeremiah designed them cabins scattered across the woods of Pleasant Hill's sprawling territory. From the outside, they looked simple holy. But inside was only a single wooden bed, barred shutters, and a door that locked from the outside. Brother Caleb, the quiet ghost who ran security, decided who would go. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He simply observed. He had eyes in every room, ears in every corner, informants who didn't even know they were informants. Caleb tracked longing looks, family mentions, tears at night, friendships that grew too deep. If you asked about your sister in Pennsylvania, he noticed. If you requested to send a letter home, he wrote your name down. If you ever said, "I miss my old life," your fate was sealed. Each retreat was cloaked in spiritual language, a time for fasting, a time for reflection. But once inside, few returned the same, if at all. Sister Hannah's pen of smoke and mirrors. For those who vanished entirely, there were still questions. From the outside world, from mothers in Ohio, from brothers in Philadelphia, from cousins who wrote letters asking, "Why haven't we heard from Samuel?" That was Sister Hannah Collins' domain. Her pen was a scalpel. Hannah forged letters that were so heartbreakingly sincere, no mother would doubt them. No brother would question. She knew each member's handwriting, had studied it like scripture. She mimicked their styles, their quirks, their word choices. She referenced inside jokes, childhood pets, local weather patterns from home. "Dear Mama, I've been called west to bring the Shaker message to new lands. The wilderness is hard, but the spirit is strong. I miss you every day." She didn't send one letter. She sent many, stretched over weeks and months until the person on the other end accepted the silence as closure. Others received updates of gentle deaths, a fever, a fall, a peaceful passing in prayer, complete with fake burial ceremonies and final words. They were masterpieces of grief management. Enough sorrow to feel real, enough spiritual purpose to prevent investigation. The disposal network, when death was not natural or even staged to appear. So, there was Brother Isaiah, the seed merchant. His monthly routes through Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee were officially business. And they were. He delivered seeds, consulted on crops, shared scripture and supper. But his wagons were modified with hidden compartments lined with straw. He buried bodies in forgotten corners of farmlands, usually on properties owned by isolated farmers who welcomed him as a spiritual guide and never asked why he sometimes camped overnight. His charm, his credibility, his routine, all carefully crafted. The perfect undertaker. Sister Patience, the keeper of lies. If a sheriff came knocking rarely but sometimes, they met Sister Patience Richardson, young, quiet, brilliant. Her records were immaculate. She had folders with travel documents showing that missing members had left of their own free will. She had letters real or forged confirming correspondence. She had death certificates, medical logs, even signatures from fictitious Shaker communities out west no one would ever find. It was a web of lies that looked perfectly normal, boring even, just enough paper to make the story unremarkable. The invisible cage. But the Richardsons' greatest weapon wasn't their cabins, or their poisons, or their forged letters. It was belief. They created a world where obedience was divine and questions were sin, where to doubt was to fall, where even your own thoughts became suspicious if they strayed too far. The members began to police each other, and eventually, they policed themselves. Chapter 4, The Machine That Fed Itself. By the mid-1820s, Pleasant Hill was no longer just a community. It was a system, a perfect, self-sustaining machine. Its walls were not built of stone or wood, but of silence, ritual obedience, and fear, disguised as devotion. The people who lived there weren't merely prisoners. They were participants in their own captivity, a perfect balance of disappearance and arrival. Strangely, Pleasant Hill's population remained stable, hovering around 400 for nearly 2 decades. This, despite the constant influx of new converts arriving every month, and the equally regular disappearances of others. The secret to this numerical miracle, Brother Caleb called it, with quiet pride, natural selection. Those who asked too many questions vanished. Those who offered wealth obedience and no resistance replaced them. The intake rituals, masks and mirrors. New arrivals were welcomed with open arms, warm smiles, prayers, songs. But behind every embrace was an evaluation. Sister Rebecca, now a master of psychological reading, conducted long spiritual counseling sessions with every convert. She listened to their stories, asked about distant siblings, old lovers, financial assets. But this wasn't pastoral care. It was profiling. A kind face paired with clinical precision. She would determine, was this soul loyal or dangerous? Was their grief exploitable? Did they still write home to a suspicious mother? Would they give up everything or cling to something? The most valuable were marked for indoctrination. The rest marked for quiet elimination, breaking the self to rebuild the servant. Indoctrination was not just about doctrine. It was about identity collapse. The method was brutal in its subtlety. Days of spiritual affection followed by days of cold neglect. Group affirmations alternating with total isolation. Rituals, fasting, humiliation cloaked as holiness. The result, trauma bonds, a psychological loop in which the abuser becomes the only source of comfort and the victim forgets that they once had a name, a will, a world of their own. Within 3 to 4 months, most converts were broken and rebuilt in Martha Richardson's image. She kept detailed files on every member, strengths, weaknesses, pressure points, updated weekly, a living library of control, a criminal empire in plain sight. By 1825, Pleasant Hill was profitable. Too profitable. But the books shown to members told a different story, one of modest earnings and communal harmony. The truth was buried behind forged ledgers, ghost employees, and off-site accounts. Brother Ezekiel's agricultural operations stretched across Kentucky and into Ohio. His unpaid, traumatized labor force worked from before sunrise to after dark, obedient, not by chains but by faith and fear. His crops flooded the markets of Louisville, Lexington, and Cincinnati, sold at prices competitors couldn't touch because his workers weren't paid, and his profits never reached the community's shared treasury. First, the sacred lie of authenticity. Brother Jeremiah's furniture shops expanded too. Shaker chairs, shaker tables, shaker beds sold throughout the Ohio River Valley. Buyers believed they were purchasing the handiwork of peaceful craftsmen devoted to God. What they were actually buying were the products of spiritual slavery. Each piece was sanded smooth by hands, too afraid to disobey. Every polished surface reflected the smile of Mother Sarah, who oversaw long-term strategy from her rocking chair near the hearth. And still no one outside suspected a thing, because the greatest lie Pleasant Hill ever told was its purity. Obedience as currency. The community no longer relied on physical fences or locked doors. It didn't need them. It had indoctrination, isolation, forged letters, and the kind of belief that made people destroy their own doubts. Even those who stayed, who survived, had become unwitting accomplices. They sang the hymns. They worked the fields. They smiled for visitors and nodded when the sermons preached about God's light and the evils of selfishness. They were trapped not by walls, but by hope. Chapter 5. The Inspector Who Knew Too Much. By the autumn of 1833, the Richardson family believed they were invincible. They had silenced every voice of dissent, forged every letter, balanced every ledger, or so they thought. But the storm that would unravel Pleasant Hill did not come from thunder or fire. It came quietly, on horseback, with an appointment letter in his coat and a ledger under his arm. His name was Elder Elias Meckham, an inspector from the Ohio Union of Shaker Communities, and unlike the others, he had not come to pray. A different kind of visitor. From the moment Elder Meckham arrived, unease spread through the community like frost creeping across a window pane. Where previous inspectors had accepted curated tours and warm bread from Sister Hannah's kitchen, Meckham asked for records, real ones, ledgers, burial logs, member rosters, backdated to the founding of Pleasant Hill in 1807. He wanted to speak privately with members chosen at random. And worst of all, he brought his own ledgers, pre-prepared, detailed, cross-referenced. He wasn't just visiting, he was investigating. Cracks in the mask. Their first meeting was held in the main hall under the watchful eyes of senior members. Brother Samuel Meckham said calmly, "Union protocol requires we review your membership rolls, financial records, correspondence files, and burial registers for the past 5 years, and conduct interviews with 50 members selected randomly." A silence fell. Samuel Richardson's face remained composed almost, but those who knew him saw the faint twitch near his left eye, the sudden tension in his jaw. "Elder Meckham," he replied gently, "we're honored by your visit. However, our records follow Kentucky customs. They may not align with Ohio standards. Perhaps a more informal approach." Meckham's tone never changed. "Authentic Shaker practice is universal, Brother Samuel, not regional." The panic behind closed doors. That night, the Richardson family gathered in secret behind locked doors with whispers that trembled. Mother Sarah spoke first. "This man knows things we can't fake. He's not like the others. We have to delay him or remove him." Brother Isaiah was blunt. "Our numbers don't add up. We claim 400 members, we have 250. Some of those graves are for people we said moved away." Sister Hannah paled. "He's already caught errors in the letters I forged. He knows Shaker penmanship styles I never studied. He's asking theological questions we never trained our members to answer." They had prepared for many things, but not for the truth walking through their gates. The inspector's shadow. Every trick the family tried only fueled Meckham's suspicions. They said records were lost in a storm, but no storm had touched Pleasant Hill in months. They offered to recommend interviewees. He insisted on a random draw. Brother Caleb's surveillance network, so efficient for 2 decades, proved useless. Meckham moved unpredictably. He chose new interview spots every time. He seemed to sense when he was being followed. And worse, members began to talk. The silence begins to crack. Sister Mary Caldwell, who had spent 2 decades silently carrying the memory of Brother Thomas Whitman's death, found herself unable to look away from Meckham's sincerity. His presence was unlike anything the community had seen. He did not intimidate. He did not manipulate. He asked gently, patiently, and the walls inside people began to fall. Women in the dormitories began questioning why they had never heard of certain Shaker traditions. Men in the furniture workshop realized they'd never been properly taught true craftsmanship. The older members began whispering among themselves. Something wasn't right, and for the first time, it was safe to say so, among the graves. Then Meckham made a simple request. He wanted to visit the cemetery alone to offer a memorial prayer. The Richardsons couldn't refuse, but they couldn't allow him to walk among the graves unsupervised either. Brother Caleb volunteered to accompany him, hoping to steer his attention away from danger. But Meckham's eyes were sharp. The burial dates didn't match the community's death records. Markers were aged wrong, some too new, others too old. Then came the breaking point. Brother Caleb Meckham said softly, "This marker shows Brother William died in 1829. But your letters mention him writing in 1830. A beat of silence. Then Caleb's voice cracking. Perhaps Sister Patience made a mistake. We deal with many members over many years. Even the most careful record keeper." Meckham interrupted kindly but firmly. "Brother Caleb, Shaker communities are known for immaculate records. What I'm seeing here isn't error. It's a pattern. The calm before the collapse." By now, the Richardson family was unraveling behind the scenes. Their lies, so carefully constructed, were buckling under the weight of a man who saw too clearly. They had ruled Pleasant Hill through fear. But Elder Meckham ruled with truth. And truth, even whispered, is more dangerous than fire. Chapter 6, Graves in Moonlight. Truth in Shadows. On the cold night of March 15th, 1834, Elder Elias Meckham could not sleep. Not for lack of comfort. The guest quarters at Pleasant Hill were warm and silent. But because the lies were louder, they followed him into his dreams. Cracks in ledgers. Ghosts in paperwork. Names that died twice, once on paper, once in earth. So he did what only a man unafraid of the dead would do. He lit a lantern and walked to the cemetery, the earth that remembered. Under the pale glow of moonlight, the Pleasant Hill Cemetery looked perfect. 40 well-kept gravestones, neatly aligned, beautifully carved. It was a scene arranged for visitors, a theater of death lovingly curated. But Meckham had buried hundreds in his years among the true Shaker communities. He knew how real cemeteries breathed, and this one, it whispered lies. The earth told the truth with its quiet dips and shadows. Soft depressions where there were no markers. Mismatched vegetation. Soil too loose for its age. The signature of too many hands digging too often too recently. This cemetery had 2 stories, one on the stones and one beneath them. Dates that didn't add up. Meckham checked his notes, cross-referencing names. Brother William, supposedly left for Ohio in spring of 1829, was buried here, with that very date etched in marble. Sister Eleanor's last letter, sent from Tennessee in 1831, rested 2 rows away. The dates were neat, too neat, as if whoever carved them had a ledger open beside the chisel. He began to see a pattern every year that brought internal descent or near exposure, ended in a new row of stones, a timeline of terror carved in limestone. The girl who remembered. Then came a sound light, footsteps on frosted grass. He turned, expecting confrontation. Instead, a voice low and trembling. Elder Meckham. It was Sister Mary Caldwell. a woman who had swept dormitories in silence for 2 decades, whose eyes held entire winters of fear, and whose soul had longed silently for this moment. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she whispered. "The ground tells the truth, whispers among the stones." Crouched between headstones, she told him everything. The Richardsons don't just lead this community, they own it. They erase it. Her voice cracked under the weight of 20 years. "I've seen them bury people in the night, not just Brother Thomas, there were more. So many more. Anyone who asked too many questions, anyone who missed home, anyone who stopped smiling. The poisoned bread." Hannah Collins. Mary said, her eyes glinting with horror. "She keeps poisons behind the herbs. In the kitchen. Special teas. Special loaves. She bakes death into supper." Meckham didn't interrupt. Didn't blink. Just let her speak. The watcher at the doors. Caleb Richardson reads every letter, listens outside dormitory doors. He always knows who's thinking of leaving before they do. He calls them problems. And the problems, they disappear. The silent wagons. She motioned toward the barn. Brother Jeremiah loads the wagons at night, covered in seed sacks. But what's inside? He buries them across Kentucky. Every delivery trip is a funeral procession. She paused. "I've seen him come back with dirt under his fingernails. The ones who weren't killed." "But they don't kill everyone," she added. The next words were nearly too terrible to say. "The strong ones. The healthy ones. They sell them." Her face twisted as if tasting the truth she had carried too long. Isaiah's seed business is just a cover. He delivers our people to plantations and mills in the South. Indentured servants bought like cattle. Not shakers, not ever. Elder Meckham's heart pounded, but his hands remained still. He had seen corruption. He had seen greed. But this was something else. A machine of exploitation, dressed in white linen and hallelujahs. Then Mary leaned closer. Her final truth was a dagger. The real Elder Samuel. He died in 1808, just a year after Pleasant Hill began. He was kind, gentle, a man of faith. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The one who stands in his place now, he's someone else. He took the name. He took the robe. He took everything." The lantern flame flickers. There among the graves, moonlight above. Lies below. Truth finally had its witness. But dawn would not wait forever. And neither would the Richardsons. Chapter 7. The Reckoning at Pleasant Hill. The implications of Mary Caldwell's confession struck Elder Meckham like a thunderclap in the chest. Not merely the scale of the murders over 25 years of blood and silence, but the theft of something more sacred, a genuine Shaker dream desecrated, a place once built for stillness and worship, twisted into a theater of terror, and at the heart of it, a family who wore holiness like a costume and wielded faith as a weapon. One last prayer among the dead. As the stars faded into pre-dawn blue, Meckham knelt in the wet grass beside the graves. Mary stood beside him, small and shaking. Around them lay decades of silence bones beneath forged headstones and lies dressed in scripture. What he carried in that moment was not just the truth, It was a burden of choice. If he confronted the Richardsons, he'd be dead by breakfast. But if he fled, they'd burn the evidence, slaughter the rest, and vanish like mist from a valley. 250 lives still inside those walls, and nearly 300 dead. He could feel the weight of them in the air. He didn't hear an answer from heaven, but he rose all the same. His choice was made. Flight at dawn. Just before sunrise on March 16, 1834, Meckham and Mary escaped Pleasant Hill. They rode fast and silent across back trails, avoiding main roads until they reached Harrodsburg. There, Meckham delivered testimony, ledgers, maps, names, patterns, and Mary Caldwell, a witness with a memory sharpened by fear. But even justice has its predators. Sheriff Morrison, long seen as an ally of Pleasant Hill, tried to delay the response. It was then Meckham learned the truth. The Richardson family had been paying him for silence for years. So Meckham bypassed him. He turned to Captain James Crawford, a federal marshal with 12 armed men and a federal warrant. And with that, the march back to Pleasant Hill began. What they found. They returned just 2 days after Meckham's departure, but it was already too late for many. The Richardson family, realizing the end was near, had made their final decision. They began clearing the slate. Of the 250 community members alive 3 weeks earlier, only 37 remained. They were found shivering, half-starved, and locked in the storage cellars beneath the main hall. Some were barely alive. Testimonies from the basement. Their stories were beyond horror. They had been locked without food or water for 48 hours. The family had debated whether to kill them all or keep the strongest alive long enough to sell them off before fleeing the state. Some had already been branded, shaved, or measured for transport. Names and buyer destinations were scrawled in ledgers found in Isaiah Richardson's quarters, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, sugar fields, cotton mills, furnace works. Their freedom had almost vanished by inches and signatures. Unearthing the mass graves. The raids uncovered burial sites across every edge of the property. Over 150 unmarked graves, some with multiple bodies inside. Poisoned, strangled, bludgeoned. They found detailed grave maps in Brother Jeremiah's carpentry shop, each marked with coded symbols and notes. It was not murder. It was inventory management, a cold, efficient ledger of elimination, the evidence of industry. In the family's living quarters, the search team found ledgers thicker than Bibles, recording sales of merchandise in shocking detail. Each victim catalogued with horrifying specificity. Name, age, condition of teeth, labor potential, breeding suitability, sale price, over $40,000 in profits, nearly $1.3 million in today's terms, earned from the sale of human beings. And behind it all, the illusion of holiness. Birth the journal of Martha Richardson. But perhaps most chilling was the discovery of Martha Richardson's personal journal. 15 years of entries not in spiritual reflection but in clinical manipulation. She referred to community members as subjects, documented experiments in emotional conditioning, outlined methods for breaking willpower, separating families, exploiting grief, and creating dependence loops. She had no remorse, only satisfaction in her methods, and plans to expand into Indiana and Ohio within 5 years. The trial. The Richardson trial opened in Frankfort summer 1834, and the entire nation watched. 7 defendants, Samuel Matha, and their 6 adult children, charged with mass murder, kidnapping, slavery and human trafficking, fraud and conspiracy. Witness after witness took the stand. Survivors, escaped victims, parents who received forged letters from children long dead, farmers who unknowingly bought seed wagons filled with corpses, and Mary Caldwell, who told the court about graves in the moonlight. Justice swift and final. It took just 2 hours for the jury to deliver its verdict, guilty, on every count. On October 29, 1834, the Richardson family was hanged before a crowd of thousands. Among the crowd were former slaves from the community, children born in captivity, brothers and sisters once separated, reunited only in mourning, their silence once forced, now roared with the sound of justice. Epilogue. The silence after the storm. Pleasant Hill was never the same. The Shaker community never returned. Its sacred spaces remained tainted. The buildings fell to disuse. The land turned wild again, but the graves remained. And the earth which had once hidden horror became a silent monument to truth unearthed. And Elder Elias Meckham, he returned to Ohio, a quiet man, a haunted man, but a righteous one. He never stopped visiting graveyards, because he had learned more than anyone. The dead have stories, and some wait decades to be heard. Chapter 8. What Remains Buried. The executions brought justice, but they did not bring peace. The rope worked, but no scaffolding could restore what had been taken from those 400 lives or the faith that had turned against them. Only 37 souls left Pleasant Hill alive. But what does it mean to survive after decades of psychological control? A starved soul and the systematic erasure of your own identity. Many wandered the years that followed as ghosts in borrowed lives, unable to trust anyone, especially themselves. What we call complex post-traumatic stress disorder had no name then. There was only shame, guilt, silence. Some were institutionalized, never able to adjust to a world whose walls did not whisper orders. Others recovered slowly with the help of gentler hands. Elder Meckham and the Ohio Shaker Community Federation offered more than prayers, they offered healing. Special Survivors Fund. Real community. Homes. Homes that valued them. Not for their labor, but for their lives. But healing came abruptly. There were no happy endings, only better endings. The state of Kentucky, desperate to bury its shame, as deep as Richardson's graves, sealed most of the records. The official story: financial mismanagement, leadership disputes, community disintegration. The buildings were quietly demolished. The land was sold to farmers without notice. No plaque, no headstone, no graves excavated. Just cornfields growing thickly over the unsettled land. To this day, Pleasant Hill remains absent from most historical accounts. No textbooks tell the story. No guided tours take you through the past. But in dusty archives sealed by state order, historians have uncovered fragments, ledgers, testimonies, burial maps, enough to estimate more than 400 souls were killed or sold in 27 years. And there may have been many more, because Richardson's records were designed for profit, not remembrance. Some victims had no names, no papers, no trace. There was only a dent in the ground, only a silent scream between the floorboards. The story of Pleasant Hill, is not just a story of evil. It is a warning, a reminder of how spiritual longing can be weaponized by those who know more about fear than faith. The Richardsons did not rule by force. They ruled by isolation, by shame, by love turned into obedience. They turned holiness into a bridle and faith into a cage. They survived for nearly 30 years, not because no one saw, but because no one believed what they saw was real. What do you think, dear listener? Was everything really revealed that day in 1834? Or do the sealed archives of Kentucky still hold darker truths? Could more bodies never be found? More names never spoken. What about the original Shakers? The ones who founded Pleasant Hill in 1807. Mary Caldwell believes they were murdered in the early days. Did the Richardsons never convert, but they were conquered? If nothing else, remember this. Evil wears a cloak. It speaks in sacred words. It offers belonging before devouring. And sometimes, the most dangerous monsters don't lurk in the shadows. They stand behind the pulpit, smiling and begging for your devotion. If this story haunts you as it does us, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe all of Pleasant Hill's secrets have been unearthed? Or are there still voices trapped underground, waiting to be heard? If you want to hear more historical horrors unearthed from the cracks of time, subscribe, tap that notification bell, and share this with those who love the dark side of forgotten history. We'll see you again in the next story. Until then, good night